climate change. It's no longer a scientific curiosity, but the overriding environmental issue of our time. The news is bad and getting worse. Over the past 50 years, hot days and hot nights have become more frequent. 8 of the 10 warmest years on record occurred between 1995 and 2006. Heat waves and floods have increased in most areas, and the incidence of extremely high sea levels has increased worldwide. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, evidence for global warming is unequivocal. Our journey into a warmer world has begun.
The rate of climate change has been grossly underestimated, and we're just starting to realize this, especially in relation to its impacts on the world's oceans and around its coastlines. We can now expect ecosystem variability and climate change to manifest itself over the next decade or so by way of ever-increasing disruptions in economic and food security, as well as the potential displacement of many millions of people living along the coast. We can expect to see major shifts in the distribution of both commercial and community-level subsistence fish stocks as a result of alterations in sea temperature and prevailing currents. Changes in the acidity of the oceans will disrupt food chains and alter entire ecosystems. This will impact on the integrity of the physical coastline and threaten food security. And it's the developing countries, especially around Africa and the Indian Ocean, which will be the hardest hit.
In Africa, a warmer climate will expose between 75 and 250 million people to increased water stress. In some countries, yields from rain-fed agriculture could be reduced by up to 50% by the year 2020. Towards the end of the century, sea level rise will affect low-lying coastal areas with large populations. The cost of adapting to sea level rise could amount to between 5 and 10% of gross domestic product. Small island states will be especially hard hit. More frequent coral bleaching events and widespread mortality of corals are expected, with dire consequences for fisheries and tourism.
These hardships will impact mostly heavily on the poorest coastal communities, as well as poor communities elsewhere that do not have the means to cushion themselves against the unstable environment.
The estimated 40 million people who live in the coastal zone of the Agulhas and Somali current large marine ecosystems are considered to be extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Governments in the region understand the threats these changes pose to their natural resources, people and economies, and that marine ecosystems are natural infrastructure needed to provide protection from storm damage and erosion and slow down climate change. But the Western Indian Ocean is losing these critical ecosystems at a time when it needs them most.
Big problem that we're all facing here is the planet's surface water, groundwater, and coastal marine problems are not going away anytime soon. And they're not easily solved in the environment in which you work, cross-border, multi-country situations.
The governments of the region are taking action to halt this destruction and restore and rehabilitate damaged ecosystems. They are working together through the Agulhas and Somali Currents Large Marine Ecosystems Project to introduce an ecosystem approach to the management of their shared marine and coastal assets. With funding from the Global Environment Facility and on-the-ground support from the United Nations Development Programme, the 9 countries are striving to optimize the use of marine and coastal resources without damaging them. Ultimately, the ecosystem approach will help the countries to collectively manage the marine resources on which their people and economies depend. The first step is to gather information. This will inform a transboundary diagnostic analysis and a strategic action program. In short, a list of problems and a strategy for addressing them collectively as a region. The second step is to look to the future and find a way for the countries to tackle climate change and the impacts it will have on their people and economies.
The project is intending to set up a long-term monitoring program that will be able to collect very credible information that can lead us into predicting these climatic variabilities that affect the human society.
To assist policymakers and resource managers at the international, national, and local levels in addressing these challenges, it is essential that we have sustained and integrated ecosystem observations.
We must do this now with a sense of urgency, particularly in those areas which are most vulnerable in terms of changes and in terms of the negative impacts to coastal communities.
The Agulhas Somali Current Large Marine Ecosystems Project is working with partners like the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and other international organizations to set up a long-term monitoring system. Oceanographic instruments have been deployed to gather information on an ongoing basis. The ultimate goal is to better prepare African governments for the impacts that climate change will have on their people. The long-term monitoring network is at the cutting edge of global efforts to improve the link between science and governance. The countries working together through the Agulhas Somali Current Large Marine Ecosystems Project are making good progress. They have taken the first steps towards the compilation of a strategic action program, a document that sets out the policy, legal and institutional reforms and investments required to address transboundary environmental problems in the Western Indian Ocean region. The preparation of the strategic action program is a cooperative process. It will culminate in the signing of an agreement that will mark the start of formal cooperation between the countries of the Western Indian Ocean in the management of their marine and coastal resources. By working in partnership, the countries are looking to the future and striving to secure the natural resources that support bountiful commercial fisheries, vitally important artisanal fisheries, a thriving tourism industry, alternative livelihoods such as aquaculture, and most importantly, the food security and well-being of their people. The 9 countries of the Agulhas Somali Current Large Marine Ecosystems are at the forefront of global efforts to introduce an ecosystem approach to the management of marine and coastal resources. Their political leaders and governments have acknowledged the long-term value of marine resources and their critical importance to coastal people and national economies. As a result, they are joining hands and facing a suite of challenges relating to the management of marine and coastal resources, including climate change. Together, the countries of the region are striving to ensure a sustainable future for their shared marine resources and their people.